There was a young man named James. He was charming, well liked, and had one love he cherished above all else: Chiamaka. She was everything to him. Her laughter was like music, her smile like a glimpse of the sun, and in her eyes he saw a world he wanted to call his own. Together they were inseparable, and James was certain nothing could ever come between them. But as the months rolled on, Chamaka began to feel differently. She loved James, but she also wanted to explore who she was beyond their relationship. The weight of his possessive love had started to feel like a cage. With a heavy heart, she went to him one evening, ready to have the hardest conversation of her life. "James, I need space," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I think it's best if we end things. I need to grow on my own." The words struck James like a dagger. His heart twisted with a pain that turned swiftly to anger and then to desperation. All he could see was a future where Chamaka belonged to someone else. The very thought turned his love into something dark, something fierce and ugly. He couldn't bear the idea of her being with another man, of her laughter filling someone else's heart with joy. "If I can't have you," he thought, "no one else will." Fueled by jealousy, James made a choice that would change both their lives forever. He went to see a healer, a man known for his mysterious powers. James pleaded with him to help, to give him something that would ensure Chamaka could never leave him. The healer, with a knowing look, handed James a small vial filled with a shimmering potion. "This will bind her to you in a way no other man can touch her," he warned. But James, blinded by his own possessiveness, ignored the warnings. The next day, James invited Chamaka for one final conversation, a goodbye meal. When she arrived, she saw James looking at her with an intense, almost wild look in her eyes. She felt uneasy, but tried to ignore it, hoping that they could part peacefully. "Please, just drink with me one last time," he said, his voice smooth but his hands shaking as he poured the drink. Unaware of his plan, she took a sip. The moment the potion touched her lips, Chamaka felt her heart race, her vision blurred, and her limbs began to stiffen. She looked at James, fears filling her eyes as she felt herself shrinking, her human form fading. In a horrifying instant, she was no longer herself. She looked down and saw small hoofed feet where her hands had been. She tried to cry, but all that escaped was the bleat of a goat. James watched as his Chamaka, stood before him transformed. He felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, a sick pride that no other man could ever look at her, talk to her, or love her as he had. She was his and his alone. But as the days turned into weeks, a terrible reality began to sink in. Gone were her laughter and her words. Every day, he saw the sadness in the goat's eyes, and it was a mirror to the darkness within his own heart. His jealousy had taken something beautiful and turned it into something hollow and lifeless. He had her all to himself, but he felt more alone than ever. Meanwhile, Chamaka's parents were devastated by her sudden disappearance. Her mother, sleepless and grief-stricken, would sit by the window every night, whispering prayers into the darkness, hoping for a miracle. Her father tried to be strong, even when he would crumble in quiet moments, aching for the daughter he had lost. His mother prayed each night, pleading, "God, bring my daughter back to me." Her faith was all she had left, and she held on to it like a lifeline. Then one night, a man of God in a distant village had a vivid, haunting dream. In his dream, he saw a young woman, her face full of despair, crying out for help. Moved by the intensity of the dream, the man of God awoke, feeling a powerful call from the Holy Spirit guiding him to a place he had never been before, James's house. The next morning he set out, following the vision with unwavering faith. Upon arriving at James's doorstep, he sensed a dark presence. Without hesitation, he explained the purpose of his visit and requested to pray over the strange goat James kept. The sight of the goat stirred something deep within him, a feeling that this was more than it seemed. At first, James has resisted, but the man's conviction and faith softened him. With a heavy heart, James stepped aside, allowing the man of God to begin his prayers. The man prayed fervently, calling upon divine power to lift the curse. He could feel a powerful resistance, a dark force clinging stubbornly to Chamaka's form. But he did not falter. He pressed on, his voice rising, his faith unwavering. Hours passed and the sun began to set. Just when hope seemed lost, a warm, radiant light filled the yard. In that moment, the spell shattered. Chamaka's form shifted, her hopes transforming back into hands, her face and body returning to her human form with a gasp. She reappeared, dazed but free at last. James, overcome by a wave of guilt and relief, rushed to her, embracing her. As tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry, Chamaka," he cried. "I did this terrible thing because I couldn't bear to lose you. My jealousy turned me into someone I didn't recognize, someone who thought only of himself. I wanted to keep you so badly that I destroyed the very thing I loved." Chiamaka looked at him, her eyes filled with sorrow and strength. She gently pulled away, gazing at him with a mixture of forgiveness and sadness. "Love isn't about possession, James," she whispered. "It's about letting someone be free, even if it means letting go." As they spoke, Chiamaka's parents, who had been told the miraculous news, arrived at James's house. The moment her mother saw her daughter standing there, her strength faltered and she collapsed to her knees. Overwhelmed by grief, she hugged Chiamaka tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. Her father, equally overcome, embraced them both, and for the first time in 20 years, their family was whole again. The man of God looked at James, his face both solemn and kind. "Let this be a lesson, James," he said. "Jealousy is a poison that consumes all it touches. Love, true love, does not bind, it sets free. You were given a second chance, a rare gift. Live with it wisely." And so, the tale of James and Chamaka became a cautionary story told in the village for generations. People remember the young man who had let jealousy overtake him and the tragic transformation that followed. They learned that love could not be forced or possessed, and that to truly love someone was to allow them the freedom to be themselves. James spent the rest of his days in humble solitude, living with the scares of his actions. He had been granted forgiveness, but he knew he would carry the weight of his mistake forever. And each time he passed by Chamaka's home, now filled with the laughter and joy he once knew, he was reminded of the lesson that jealousy, left unchecked, could turn even the purest love into something dark and twisted. We've come to this end of this amazing, amazing short story. I hope you did enjoy it. Really a moral lesson. Love doesn't bind, it lets go. If you truly love someone, let the person be free and let it go. Surely, if the person is truly yours, the person will come back to you. If this is your first time stumbling into Begli Stories, you're highly welcome. For my returning subscribers, a big thank you. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on your bell button.